Thank you all for coming today. Most of you are here as volunteers. Very few are here on a compulsory basis. So thank you all for coming at all. I'm just getting used to my new gown. It's molting quite badly today. I'm not quite sure what my predecessor did to it, but there's hair everywhere. I'd like to start by thanking the solicitor, the batonnier and you, sir, for your very kind words. The batonnier mentioned that he and I go back a long way. We were at school in Jersey together, by chance the same university, and again by chance we ended up working in the same county, Devon, in separate barristers' chambers in the 1990s. And I recall in particular, we crossed swords on a few occasions, one trial we had in the now closed and defunct Penzance County Court. I was for the plaintiff and Advocate Cadin for the defendant. It was a road traffic collision case. Remember my surprise that was shared by the district judge, when Advocate Cadin produced a couple of small Dinky toy cars from his pocket in order to demonstrate by playing with the cars in front of the judge on the desk before him, the accident could only have occurred in the way described by his client. Remember that? Modesty prevents me from revealing the result of that trial. Anyway, we had many happy years on circuit, and I may come back to that again in due course. Before going any further, I'd like to thank my parents for their love and support. My brother Duncan is a school teacher, and he works in Somerset. Teaching is important, and he can't be here today. My mother firmly believes that her other son, me, has, in contrast, never had a proper job. I can imagine the scene at home this morning. Why are we going to this thing, George? Robert's never really worked at all, has he? Well, there it is. But I can probably blame Dad, at least in part, for her views. I say this, sir, because a career in law was a consequence of a chance discussion I had with Dad in the car on the way to school one morning in 1985. I told my dad I was filling in my university application form. He asked me what I was putting down for my degree choice, and I said I was going to put down history, which was my big thing at school. He told me not to do that, and I should put down law instead. I asked why, as I'd never knowingly met a lawyer and knew nothing about law. Some of you may feel there's been no real change on the latter point, but that's a matter for you. He said it would be a good career, and children were so compliant and obedient in those days. I can't imagine the same trick working with my children today. In any event, I went to school, crossed out history, and inserted law instead. I realised my mistake, sir, within the year when I began to read law at university. It was very boring. It seemed to bear almost no relationship to real life, and certain aspects of it, particularly English land law, seemed to me to offend common sense in every particular. Luckily, we're spared that in Jersey. Anyway, so I went to the history department and asked if I could change course to history, and they said yes, they'd be delighted to have me. I went back to law and said I was going to leave. They didn't mind, and they said they did mind. Not because I was any good, you understand, because they just banned cross-faculty switching. And if I wanted to switch, I could only switch within the faculty to economics or politics, so I stayed with law, and here I am today. And as I said, I ultimately spent very many happy years on the Western Circuit, and I'm touched and delighted that some of my colleagues, whom I last practiced with in January 2001, are here today, particularly Judge Francis Gilbert, Mary McCarthy, and Fred Howell from Truro. So, sir, my family came to Jersey in 1976. And accordingly, although most of my schooling was in Jersey, firstly at the Moy School, then at Prep, as the batonnier said, and Victoria College, I can't point or refer to illustrious predecessors who have served this island in previous decades or centuries. Well, in fact, that's not quite right. Because in the year 1778, the Earl of Seaforth was asked to raise a regiment of 1,000 men. They became known as the 78th Seaforth Regiment. They were mainly drawn from one small West Highland clan, and they were more commonly known by the name of that small clan. They were called the Wild MacRaes. The newly formed regiment was sent to Edinburgh and quartered in the castle. A rumour went round that they were to be sent to the East Indies. They were furious as they'd left their crofts and enlisted on condition that they were to do no more than 3 years' service. They refused to board ships and marched to Arthur's Seat by Edinburgh Castle, took up positions, prepared to defend themselves against any assault, saying they would remain there until their demands were satisfied or they were ejected. This caused a sensation amongst the Edinburgh citizenry. The mutineers were supplied with provisions, and the people of Edinburgh sided with them. The authorities did not have the same benevolent view. Senior generals of the army in Scotland immediately summoned more troops to Edinburgh, and days of talks began with the MacRaes. The MacRaes demanded a pardon for mutiny, payment of their outstanding levy money, and a promise they would not be sent to the East Indies. The generals, including the Duke of Buccleuch, caved in to the MacRaes' demands, whereupon the MacRaes formed themselves into a marching order and left the hill with pipes playing with a large crowd behind. And one of the paths leading to the top of Arthur's Seat is still called Piper's Walk in memory of the MacRaes' ascent of the hill. Where were they sent, if not to the East Indies? Well, later the same year, they were sent to Guernsey, and one half of the MacRaes onward to Jersey. In 1779, they prevented a French landing at St. Juan's Bay, dragging their cannon across the sand. And why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because although, as I've said, there'll be no MacRaes inscribed on the list of eminent Jersey lawyers, there are indeed MacRaes in court beyond those handful of MacRaes. Are they wild MacRaes? I'm not sure. Sitting in the royal box. They're looking down on us from the famous portrait, The Death of Major Pearson by Copley, sitting at the back of court. And it's appropriate that I tell this story today, as today is the anniversary of the Battle of Jersey. And we are now at the very hour, noon, that battle began to rage, where we are now, in the Royal Square. And I promise the remainder of my speech will take no longer than the battle took on the 6th of January, 1781. Some of you will recall the day began with the French forces under Baron de Raucourt surprising the governor in his pyjamas, lying about the number of troops they had, claiming they were going to burn down the town and thereby procuring his surrender. I'm sure, Your Excellency, an RAF man wouldn't have given in so easily. In any event, the governor agreed to order the surrender of the 78th of the MacRaes and the other British soldiers and the Jersey militia. The troops refused to surrender. When Captain Mulcaster received the written order to surrender and deliver his arms to the royal court, he was at Elizabeth Castle, where he'd just been joined with the St. Lawrence militia. He refused to read the order, put it in his pocket, and said he did not understand French. Major Pearson, who was the senior officer of the 95th Infantry, who were here with the 78th and MacRaes, responded to the request to deposit his arms in the Royal Square by replying, "Yes, we will carry our arms to the courthouse, but there'll be a bayonet on the end of every musket." At about 11 a.m., the governor himself was sent by de Roulcourt to see Major Pearson, who has now joined Major Pearson by members of the militia and the Highlanders. The governor said to Major Pearson, "There has been a very sudden surprise. I was made prisoner before I was out of bed." And Pearson is reported to have replied, "Sir, give me leave to inform you that the 78th and the 95th have not in the least been surprised." He again refused to surrender. Pearson sent some of the Highlanders to Mont-de-la-Ville, where Fort Regent now is. And if you look at that picture carefully, or better still, one on the internet under better lighting, you'll see at least 20 Highlanders at the top. And they would have been mainly MacRaes. They were sent there to prevent a French retreat, and the remaining forces marched from Westmount on the Royal Square, dividing at Charing Cross, with the MacRaes coming up Broad Street with the St. One and St. John militia, and the 95th and other militia forces coming up King Street. And we all know what happened in the battle. Pearson was mortally wounded, as later on was de Roulcourt. De Roulcourt came out of the Royal Court, holding the governor, whereupon a group of Highlanders, which would have included MacRaes, opened fire. 4 bullets hit the French commander. 2 bullets went through the governor's hat, so he was fortunate that the MacRaes didn't do for him as well. Sorry, Your Excellency. And the bravery of one Kenneth MacRae earned him the privilege of carrying dispatches to the War Office reporting the French defeat. So the MacRaes have, in fact, played a role in the history of Jersey. Unfortunately, the affair has a slightly sad ending for the MacRaes, because as if to prove that you can never rely on the word of an Englishman if you are a Scotsman, the 78th were in fact, shortly after the Battle of Jersey, all sent to the East Indies. Few saw Scotland again, and indeed their commanding officer died before the ship reached St. Helena. So I'm looking forward to serving the island in a judicial capacity and serving the States Assembly when appropriate. So the other day, someone had the temerity to ask whether I had any judicial experience. I replied by saying that I had. In 2018, I was selected as a judge at the Alderney Week Sandcastle building competition. So I made a great success of that, and I think most of the appeals against my decisions have been determined. Some in my favour. It's right to disclose to you that I wasn't selected the following year as a Sandcastle judge, even though I made it quite clear I was available. As to the sort of judgments I might deliver, I hope the remarks made by my A-level geography teacher in 1985 in the school report I found the other day do not come back to haunt me. I stumbled across this only a few days ago, and my A-level teacher said the following: "His fluent and positive style of writing often disguises the fact that his essays are rather shallow." So, sir, having thanked my parents, I should like to thank my children for their unstinting kindness and support to me. Only they know how much has meant to me over the years. There was a hiccup the other day when I had to explain what the fluffy bits on the robe the Deputy Bailiff wears are made of. Some of you may know that historically these were produced 30 or 40 years ago. There were funds for ermine to trim the bailiff's gown, but insufficient for the deputy bailiffs, which are trimmed with rabbit. When I broke this news to my daughter, she threatened to bring her pet rabbit Ginger to court today by way of a silent protest. Happily, she relented this morning, which is, I think, good news for all round, particularly for Ginger. So at the last Assize d'Héritage, I mentioned my debt of gratitude to the staff at the Law Officers Department and the privilege it's been to occupy the office of Attorney General since 2015. I repeat those observations today. And I thank everyone here today from the LOD for your kindness, diligence, and frequently brilliance over the last 5 years. The island is lucky, fortunate to have a department providing such excellent legal advice for a small nation. So I'm conscious of the importance of the reputation for fairness that the judiciary of this island possesses, and its proven ability to resolve disputes to the benefit of all those who come before the courts. Justice is blind, and disputes affecting those who live in challenging circumstances, as many do in this island, are as important as those which affect the reputation of this island. I look forward to working with the jurats and delivering justice with them and, of course, the bar. And finally, to the bar, sir, I know that members of the judiciary sometimes become affected with a disease called judgeitis. I do hope that I can count upon you to let me know if I fall victim to this disagreeable complaint. But not today. That would be too early. And thank you to those who've given me your best wishes. And my favourite has to be, Dear Robert, who needs luck when you've got talent? Good luck with a new job. Thank you for listening.